Welcome back, everybody. I enjoyed a lovely vacation. Got out of town for a little bit, but I missed you guys, and in proper ridiculous format, I decided to come back with a bang. So I got Ron McPherson and Jennifer Owen. They're going to sit down with me. We're going to talk school monies. I'll probably get in a fight over vouchers because I'm not anti-voucher. I'm not pro-voucher. I'm just open to the idea of doing it differently because apparently the way we do it doesn't work right. So I'm open to it. Going to try to get back in the groove of things, keep a number of shows coming to you soon and hot and heavy. We're almost in agreement at gmail.com, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Our website is live at almostinagreement.com. Check us out there. Help us out, tell your friends about us. I assume that I am just like you, trying to understand all the craziness that's going on around us. So the more you need, the more you know, the better we can do about it. So we're almost in agreement. Stick around. Like I said, we've got some school budget money talkings. See if we can figure out how much it takes to get a kid smart. Here we go. All right, guys. Like I said, I've got Ron McPherson and Jennifer Owen with me. We're going to talk about money because that's all anybody ever wants to talk about, I guess. And so, first, thanks for coming on, guys. I'm painfully curious trying to figure out the bottoms of this because the baseball stadium conversation plays into this because of how that's going to get financed and the budgeting and stuff like that, and how much of that increased revenue from that district will help us add funds to the school district and stuff. And so, again, falling down the rabbit hole of how freaking complicated stuff is, I'm trying to, I'm trying to figure out a way to, I don't know, put a basic idea of the budget out to people's heads, because one of the things I think where Jennifer and I started when we were chatting on the Speak Facebook group was, I guess, one of my questions I always come back to when we're having this conversation is how much should it cost, or how much would we want to pay for schools? Because I think they're like the standard argument is always more money. And it's like, I agree that is an option. But I can never quite get a grasp or get anybody to give me an answer of like, well, it should take a student X number of dollars to get through a year. Instead, this is what we have to spend on that student, so that's what we spend. Does that make sense?
It does, but I think the question of what it should cost depends on what you want. If you looking at what we pay right now, it's in line with daycare costs. So do we want our education system to be so basic that it's really just funding care? Or do we want to really have in-depth education for our students?
Right. And but there's two parts of that to me, I guess, is that you're looking at, that is a goal for some people in the school system. That is part of what the school system does. It is a daycare program for a number of families as much as it is an education. So I follow that, but I mean, again, this is where I get lost, is that I don't understand how much things should cost. And I guess that's where maybe that's where we could start. I don't know. I mean, I follow what you're saying, Jennifer, for sure, as far as, the spending the minimum does not necessarily get us the outcome. So I guess maybe that's it. What are the goal outcomes that are discussed inside the school board, as far as what do we want out of our school system? What are the results we're aiming to achieve?
I think that's a very long conversation.
That's why I do long format shows, because again, I understand that it's different from person to person, from family to family. Everybody kind of has their own specifics. And like I said, I like to do podcasts on Monday mornings because I don't work on Monday days and the kids are at school. So the get them out of the house and give me some of my adult headspace time is a value to me in the school system, among other things. But what is the, we talked about this a lot last time, Ron, is what are the metrics we're using to say we're doing good or doing well, and we like to compare to other school systems. I understand that part. And I don't know. I guess that is the main question to me, is like, what do we want out of a school system? And how do we kind of coalesce that into a base idea, because again, I understand it'll be a very broad individual answer, but there's got to be some basics that we agree on as a community, right?
Well, I mean, one of them that kind of jumps out to me is obviously we would want all of our students to be proficient readers. That's one thing. Now, I think the question you ask a good question. I think the reason it's difficult to answer is because all students are different, right? And so there's not necessarily a magic amount of money or this optimal amount of money that you must spend on every kid to achieve some of the gains you want. And so I think that makes it really difficult. So when you look at it, you can look at it in a couple of different ways. What do we need for every kid versus what does the district need as a whole to achieve certain outcomes as a district, which does not necessarily speak to whether individual students' needs are being met. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah. Because I guess what was popping into my head off of that is that if seeing as how both the goals of the parent and the differences in student are broad, that it's understandably difficult to have a large system like the Knox County school system be able to define specifics for those two individual things. Because me as a parent wants XYZ, and then my kid has this set of standards that he's either learned through us or a disability that he was born with or something like that, and to try to get a massive system to be able to adjust to my wants and his abilities at the same time is difficult. And so I guess that to me, and again, this is where I get in a lot of heat, because I'm open to vouchers and people get mad at me about it. And I'm open to vouchers specifically for this kind of conversation, in that my wants and my kids' abilities, if I have a voucher, I can use that voucher as leverage to get my wants and my kids' abilities more directly tended to, where the larger school system doesn't have that ability. It's not a fault of the school system. It's just a reality of size.
Yeah, that's a good point. I will say this, though. If some of the models that I've seen with respect to vouchers, the kids maybe that would want to exit out of public schools that may be struggling, for instance, if the voucher would suggest the average per pupil cost, and that's what the parent would be given, I would argue that in many cases, private schools cannot provide the level of support that actually the public schools can, and particularly with respect to special education needs. And so typically the voucher, again, in some of the models I've seen, and some of the kids that we would be talking about that would maybe leave the public schools because maybe they don't feel the supports are there, what they would find is going to a private school, that the private school would be ill-equipped to be able to handle the needs.
Or it'll far exceed the amount the voucher covers. And
exactly. Now, Jennifer may have some ideas about that too, but that's just on the surface, some of the issues that I think crop up.
I think the voucher amount last year was $7,200.
Yeah, and that's
you can't go to private school for that.
No.
If they even accept you. And
right.
I looked at some stats last week, and I think the average acceptance was about 85%. So 15% of kids who are applying for private school now, who can afford to do it, are being turned away.
Right. Okay, so that reminds me of something, just to bring up a clarification from last time we talked, Ron, is the BEP is based on enrollment. So right. So kids that are currently in private schools, they're
not included in the calculation.
Right. So if my neighbor has a kid in private school, even though he would be districted for the same school as my kid, that school is not getting money as appropriate to number of kids districted there. It's just the kids that are going there.
Correct.
Okay. So
so for a private school, they receive no BEP money, and the only BEP money we would receive would be students that are actually enrolled in our schools.
Okay,
charter school's a little different.
Right. My intent here was not to do a whole voucher conversation, but because one of the often used arguments in the voucher is that it's taking money away from the public schools. But if the public schools aren't getting the money from the BEP funding anyway, what money is it taking away from a public school? If I chose to take my kids out of public school, their amount of BEP comes out of that school as well, right?
Yeah, the problem would be is there's not necessarily really nice, neat economies of scale with that.
Right.
So you may have a kid exit out, but their BEP requirements would still be the same for the classroom that child would.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Because you use first grade often when we were talking last time, and that's 20 kids. And so if if I had a first grader and he comes out, it's 19. That's still one teacher. Either way. Okay.
Yep.
That makes sense.
You got it.
All right. This as I mentioned all the time on the show, I'm just trying to understand. It's so complicated. I sent an email to Mr. Mamontoff this morning because I've been talking to him about baseball and all that kind of stuff, asking him how some of the taxes break down in the county, because he seems to be the most intelligent, tax understandable person that I've met so far. And
he's a good one.
what I thought was a simple question ends up with a 6-paragraph answer that I still can't quite grasp. Because again, one of the things with the baseball project is that's a section of town that is making no money, for lack of a better word, but some of it will still go into the state. And I guess one of the questions I have on that is that of the small percentage of sales tax revenue in these special tax districts, because we already have one downtown for the convention center, does that portion of money go in when it goes to the state get pushed back into school budgets? Do we know?
No. So it's based on my understanding. As the legislation we currently read, those dollars would be used to offset the cost of the stadium build.
Right, but what he was telling me was that, like, okay, so this is a quote from him, is if you shop within the CBID, which is the downtown district for the convention center, on a $100 sale at 925 and it's generating sales tax revenue, $1.50 of that goes to the state. Of the difference, most goes to pay the debt. The other goes into some other weird, complicated stuff. So of that $1.50 that goes to the state, does that go into school budgets of the state?
With regards to the sales tax, well, that would go to the state, and then the state would use those dollars that would go into the state's pool to allocate accordingly. So that would not be the local option portion. So
right.
The way that I kind of think about the stadium is right now there's really no revenue that we get from sales tax in that area anyway.
Right.
If the stadium were to come, and if that special district, if that went solely towards the stadium and whatever amount goes to the state, so forth, the school system wouldn't be out anything because we're not getting anything anyway, right? But what I guess my position would be is that would still generate folks that would come in, maybe go downtown to eat, do certain things around that area that would benefit the school system because it would be outside of that special district. So it would just bring more traffic.
Right. Plus we could do some fun activities for the schools there. That'd be a fun place to do a graduation, something like that. I'm a Bearden alum. We graduated at Thompson. That was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. So use the, what do they call it? Larson likes to call it civic furniture. So use some of that civic furniture for the schools. But again, like I said, is like, I can't, I don't know. I mean, this year being the crazy year that it was, it makes the complicated conversation even more complicated in trying to figure out, I guess, solutions when, because again, Jennifer and I met not through my normal channels of chasing down elected officials, but through arguing with people on a Facebook group. And again, like it's, I want to be able to have an educated and informed self as well as other people to talk solutions instead of just talking in the abstracts, because the abstracts are always
right.
Because again, the base argument's always the schools need more money. Yeah. Yes. I mean, how do you argue against that? But it's like, what we will never settle on a number with that argument, because it'll always be more money next time. It'll always be more money next time. And so I guess the question would be, if we had more money, what's the first thing we're doing?
I think the how much more, there is a partial simple answer there. The comptroller has done a decade-long study, and found that we underfund statewide by over 400 million. So putting that much in would be a start.
Okay,
The other thing to look at is when people think about the BEP. I told you when we talked before that these are state schools. They're all state schools, even though the counties manage them. They're state schools, but the state isn't funding them. And if you look at what it sounds like the intent of the BEP is, it's for the state to fund that basic education, and then for the county to fund whatever additional the people in that community want to have for their schools. But that's not how it's actually working, because the state doesn't fund their share. And so the state funds this little portion and then forces the county to fund everything that the legislators have put into law that they don't fund at all. And so then that cuts and cuts and cuts what counties are able to do.
Okay, so would this end up coming across as more of a shell game, though, that if the state did fund it, they would take more taxes in other places instead of, because for me, the end user in the conversation, if the state's going to cover their, let's just for simple math, we get out to $10, whatever. The state needs to spend $10 in Knox County for school system, and currently they're only spending $8. And they need to make up that $2. They're just going to add $2 to my taxes somewhere in the process. And then in turn, what is the county going to do as a result? I follow what you're saying, but at the end of the day, for me as the tax-paying citizen, does it come out as a wash? In that my tax spent that goes into the school system, whether it's spent for county money or for state money, still comes out to the same number on the other side. Does that make sense?
I don't think it would, because here's what I keep hearing about this year's budget. I'm hearing that at the state level, they are, quote, swimming in money, but they're not moving any of it to anywhere. It's all just being put back and put back and put back. And
right. I talked to Senator Massey about that. It's like, what's this rainy day fund that we keep talking about and being proud of, which is, it's not a bad thing, don't get me wrong, but when does it cap? When do we say, okay, there's enough setback that we can start spending some of this money instead of just holding it back and holding it back and holding it back?
Right. And there's a point where we have to have a rainy day fund. There's, that baseline that needs to exist, but to just keep throwing money into it, why? They don't seem to have a plan for what they're saving for. It's like they're unwilling to spend it, but also unwilling to plan for when to spend it.
Right.
And I think that's problematic. The other issue that I see is that at the state level, there are about a dozen BEP bills in the legislature just this week. And they're all a little different. But what I'm hearing over and over from the legislature is, well, they're getting this CARES Act money, they're getting this ESSER money, so that's going to make up for it. But that's literally not legal. And so they're trying to pass all these bills. They're trying to create laws in Tennessee about funding that depend on breaking laws federally. So it's very tricky, because in the education subcommittee last week, it was Scott Sapicki who's running the bill, and he said, "Oh, I think that teachers would be willing to deal with districts and wait and see if they're needed in the fall." What person is going to sit around for months and months not knowing if they have a job when they could go to a neighboring district or when they could go to some other career? Who's going to sit around and wait not knowing, especially right now?
Right.
It doesn't make sense. And they seem to think that they can go ahead and fund us at this low level. And then in the fall, hey, you end up with 3,000 more students. Well, you've got the teachers on the back burner. They'll be there. No, they won't.
Right. Okay. I get what you're saying. I mean, it's a question of planning. And we talked about this a little bit last time, Ron, because you said that you were telling me that enrollment was down, pandemic related, presumably.
Sorry, Seth, you faded out.
No, we were talking about that.
Yeah, I got you.
This year we were down in enrollment because of pandemic and such like that, and the concern being that hopefully over the summer, this thing finally comes to an end, and we cut this pandemic off at 16 months or 18 months or however long, and we can go back to a life-ish, normal-ish. And that next school year, we're going to have a big surge of new students coming back, and then the budget's going to be set on numbers that aren't real anymore, and then we have to figure out how to make up for that. Which I fully foresee as a likely. I mean, that sounds reasonable to me. If I wasn't essential and I got to get paid unemployment for the whole time, I might have pulled my kids out and homeschooled them for it. But I liked it. I mean, I was generally happy with our pandemic response school board wise, with the options that were given for us here in Knox County. Okay, so again,
before we move to something
else,
I think it's important to note that a lot of the students who did not enroll in the fall were kindergartners. So instead of going ahead and starting their kindergartners in the fall, parents either homeschooled them for a year so that they could start in first grade, or a lot of parents just chose to hold them a year and let them start kindergarten this year. And we don't know how many that really may be. So there's a chance that there could be a huge need there.
Right, we're
not sure of yet.
We're gonna have one giant class of kindergartners this year that's going to continue to move up through the program, significantly larger than average, because we have a bunch of kids that, I guess, 5 turning 6 that normally would be going into first grade that are now in kindergarten.
Right.
Oh, that's an interesting little factoid. See, these are the things that I wouldn't think about because my kids are past that at this point.
I don't think we thought about it in Knox County either, but in Memphis and Nashville, there had been a lot of discussion around that. And so when we got together with our lobbyists to talk about what we need to do, that was one of the points that came out, was that a lot of them are kindergartners, and it's going to cause a problem every year, because at every grade needs are going to shift as they move up.
Right. Because because that's one of those alternate ideas that I've heard about and thought about a little bit in different ways of doing schooling, but that's not an important rabbit hole to go down right now. So again, this one and then normal tax conversation are the ones that I really struggle to find the questions to help me understand, which is why I'm fumbling around in my head right now trying to think of a question to follow up. Is, I don't know. It's. I think one of the main things that I want to get across and what I want to do is that it's a community involvement conversation. I think that's the top of the list of things that we as a community need to get involved, because until I started doing the show, I didn't even realize we elected school board, and until I started doing the show, I didn't realize how autonomous governmentally the school board was against, the regular county government, as well as the sheriff's office and all that kind of stuff. And so what, coming out of the pandemic, especially since we can't do in-person and stuff, what are some things that people can do to get more involved, to be able to be more at least be more educated about what's going on, to have a more informed outlook on what's happening? Either one of you.
I think talking to their school board members is one thing to do. It often people contact us when they have a specific personal need. And I think the more people contact their school board members and have discussions like you're having, I think that's how to get involved.
Okay. Because I think, I think one of the things is it's confusing. It's just really confusing, and not knowing what to ask and not knowing how to talk about it. Because I think we started with the right topic of community goals for school systems, and what do we want out of our schools as a community? Because long story short, it's an investment. It's all we're doing. We're investing in the next generation of whatever, the same way we want streets that bridges that stay up when we're driving across them, and fun civic furniture, if you will, with a baseball stadium to make our town interesting and entertaining. This is an investment in the next generation of people that get to go out into the workforce and hopefully stay here and then contribute tax dollars and all that kind of stuff. And so I don't know. Again, I guess that's probably the best starting point for me in trying to get a better understanding of what needs to change. I guess is if we can somehow get to a point of a general consensus on goals. And I think I understand that's not something we have in front of us currently, but I think that's probably our number one problem is we don't have a universal goal. It's a get through tomorrow kind of format, at least that's what it feels like in talking about it to most people.
Well, I get your point. So the board and the superintendent, they have adopted a 5-year strategic plan that outlines that there's 3 overarching goals: increase student achievement, eliminate disparities, and build a positive school culture. So I think the board knows where it wants to go. They want to go in a particular direction. The thing that's sometimes is a bit discouraging, I think, too, Seth, is when historically when we've had community forums on budget and so forth, and we'll have one this year as well. Typically, they're not well attended, to be honest, and so I think the question is it's hard to what does the community want, and I think sometimes that folks that maybe are engaged, they're really engaged with respect to their kid and with respect to the school their kid goes to,
right.
And so if my kid is doing well in school and I like my school, then I'm happy with whatever's going on now, right? So I think there's kind of a larger, kind of speaks to your question. I think that as a district, do segments of the community or communities, how much do they care about maybe other segments of the community, right? So at any rate, so I think Knox County is it's kind of in some ways unique in that we have we have different pockets right around the county, and there's significantly different income levels around those pockets. So for something like what you're talking about, I think the community together must come around as a whole. Well, and how to make that happen is a great question.
And again, I think most people don't think of it as a community investment. They don't think of it the same way as they think of a new bridge or getting 40 widened or whatever. They don't think of schools in that same investment ideal. They just think of it as, because again, I argue to death right now that to any of my friends that don't have kids, it still matters what the school's doing. It still matters how they're spending their money. It still matters who the elected officials for the school board are. And most people, especially without kids, don't think of it that way. And then, like you said, those that have kids are very focused on their own and what their own are doing, not what, because again, it's like, we could go into the whole litany of problems and it's a chicken or an egg or whatever. But, we've had, I don't know, I think we're already at 2019's murder total in this year already, and we can say the schools we could say it's whatever, however causal we want to put it or whatever, it's a chicken or the egg, whether it's the bad neighborhoods that the schools are in or the schools are creating bad neighborhoods. We could make it whatever argument we want, but these are things that play off each other, and at some point these people were in school systems, whether it was ours or not, that are perpetrating said crimes and getting into activities that we don't want to do because they don't have a positive legal outlook on how to go about their lives. And so even, again, I get my point in all that is to say that school investment changes these kind of things as well. And people don't think of it like that. People think of it as just that 12, 13-year period where the kids are out of my house and they're doing something else and somebody else is taking care of them and I can go about my business. Or those without kids are like, I don't know, it gives me the ability to go to work and not have kids running around all the time and I don't have to deal with all these other people. It's just I get to focus and do my job. And that's a total outlook thing that I think is a problem societally. And I don't think it's just a Knox County local thing.
Right.
I think it's the people that have the people that have interest in it, have a specific interest, and then the people that need to be involved for whatever reason don't have anything that perks their ears up enough to keep them trying to stay on top of it. I'm going to open this link and see if it doesn't freak out my computer.
I think looking at students now, I don't think the larger community sees where students are going. They don't see that those are individuals who are going to be their doctors in 25 years.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
They're going to be the people caring for them when they're in nursing homes. I taught in a small district just a little north of us in the mid 90s. One of my students is the sheriff there now. One of them is a school board member. I didn't have anything to do with that, but that's, thinking about that, and I was teaching high school at the time, but what they learned in school and how they interacted with other people in school and what opportunities were available to them, that all shapes what the community is going to be like years from now.
Right. And I think for people like myself who, and I was here or there on school, but if I had a better outcome through what I did through school, I might have had more interest directly out of. I think I think there's I think the apathy of the public to what the schools are doing rubs off on the kids that are in the schools, so they just don't care about them once they leave. I think you would care more if everyone around you cared more in the process. And again, I think that's spot on. And that there's a kid graduating from some high school this year that in 5 or 6 years is going to be, maybe he's going to be a commissioner or starting a business here in Knoxville. And that is an investment that we all made to get that person to that point. And it works both ways, with the positive ones with the guy starting a business, or the negative ones, the people that go into the system and stay in the system for the rest of their lives, and that kind of mess. I opened this thing and it didn't freak out on me, so that's a good one. So in the 5-year plan, the objectives are reading proficiency, math proficiency, and ready graduates. So let me see what a ready graduate is. That's a curious one to me. Create and implement a plan for all high schools to increase composite ACT scores. Align career and technical course offerings to ensure programs towards industry certifications. I like that one. I'm big on trade school stuff. Educate students and families on how to navigate all aspects of college and career entry. That's cool. I like that one. That was one of the things I failed miserably as a student, was taking advantage of any of the career assistance, job help finding kind of things, especially in college level. But
and that's a place where we are very underfunded at the state level, is in having counselors to help students with that.
Okay. So again, all right, going back to the budgetary conversation. So so the BEP formula essentially sucks, or it doesn't suck. It's just not fully, because again, this is where I get confused, because I watched the State of the State and Mr. Lee was bragging on the fully funded BEP this year like it was a good thing, and inside the Speak group especially, it's like, no, it's not really that big a deal, because it's fully underfunded is what there was essentially what he's saying.
Yeah, so the fully funded can mean a lot of things, right? I mean, fully funded, does that mean, hey, we're giving you the same amount we gave the year before, we're not taking anything out of the pool, yada yada. But here's what it boils down to, Seth. So for Knox County has about 6% of student population statewide. Knox County receives about 4.5% of the funding. So what that translates to is about $70 million is actually redirected away from Knox County into other districts. And so,
okay, hold on. I want to interrupt on that. I'm sorry, but
okay.
But we do that inside the district as well, because we have certain school districts inside of Knox County that have funds redirected away from them into other schools of less, what was the word? I can't remember the word we used last time. It's economic disparity conversation. And so, hell, the town of Farragut, as tax-wise, sends the least money to their schools. But, Austin East or something like that gets significantly more. And I'm not pushing back on it. I mean, I'm
no.
I'm of the school as if the state says my kid gets $7,500, my kid gets $7,500 whether my kid's school is a good school or my kid's school is in a less good neighborhood. But anyway, I fully agree with your thought. I just wanted to throw that out there for context.
No, that's fine. Yeah, so I'm not speaking against the motive behind that, right? Because some districts don't have the ability to pay their own way like Knox County and some of the other metropolitan districts would. So what I'm saying though is that when the term is used fully funded, for some districts around the state, it may be close to that, right? For Knox County, it equates to maybe 50% or less.
Right.
So I just mentioned that to say that, you know, if the governor comes out and recommends that, hey, we're going to put in the BEP formula an amount sufficient to give we're going to raise teacher salaries by 4%, right? We don't receive the money from the state in order to raise teacher salaries 4%. We receive enough money to probably raise teacher salaries about 2%.
Right, and that's assuming that all teachers are on the base $48,000 salary, not some.
Yeah,
you know.
So that's another issue. That's
right.
right. So there's and that's that physical capacity issue. So the formula is very clear, and it's the same methodology used for every district, and it's based on the number of students enrolled. But the formula also then adjusts by a physical capacity index for all 140 or so school districts. So that's where the 4.5% funding versus a 6% population comes in. And so if anything, any gap there must be funded locally. Plus anything over and above what the BEP formula would fund must be funded locally.
Right.
So that's that. And so I'm not, and don't hear this as me advocating for a tax increase necessarily, but it's been over 20 years since there's been a property tax increase in Knox County. So, so all I'm saying is that to the degree that you're underfunded, so to speak, from the state, that puts more of a burden on the local. But I will say this, and then I'll be quiet. Locally, the last time I looked at it, Knox County ranked about 11th in the state in total per pupil funding. That's on the local side. But we ranked really low on the state per pupil funding. So, that's really where the problem is, to be honest, at the state level, in spite of the fact there hasn't been.
So wait, hold on. I'm trying to understand that stat. So,
Okay.
Of the counties in Tennessee, we are 11th in per pupil spending, but in the country, we are the bottom of per pupil spending. The state is the bottom.
Sorry, in the state. In the state. Now, well, yeah, in the country we're way low too, but you have to factor in, cost of living and cost of living index and all of that. So,
if you look at the total, Knox County ends up 94th in total student funding per pupil in Tennessee.
In the state,
out of 100.
I thought it's lower than that.
by county. So for all the counties in the state of Tennessee, the state,
all the school districts.
Okay, so the state kicks in. The amount the state kicks in puts us at 94th of the 120 so districts.
142, but yes.
142. Okay, but we make it up and put us at 11th from local expenditure.
The last time I looked, that was about 2 years ago, but it probably hasn't shifted greatly since then. But I got to tell you, we've benefited in Knox County. We've benefited from sales tax revenue. The economy and the economy is still held up, fortunately, through the pandemic. So, that's the reason we've been, kind of been able to keep going is the economy. Now, if what we feared was that the pandemic would just really put a wall up on that, but that hasn't been the case. So we've been pleasantly surprised.
Right, because that does. Like I've been a proponent of like the fair tax and taking off of federal income tax and going to a federal sales tax or something like that to replace it. because it makes more sense to me but that being one of the negatives I never thought about before is like, if we have a slowdown, all the different organizations that depend on that tax revenue because of economics really get hurt on it. So yeah, and then it's been crazy, really just plain crazy how well economically things have kind of continued through all this debacle. Okay, so I don't know. I guess so. The first thing is the first thing to try to clean up is to try to get that BEP adjusted to a larger number total, or get the state. I would just get the state to pay more is really what we're getting at here. And is that? Yeah, I don't know. I lost myself in numbers just there. So the state is funding, but the core number just doesn't make sense, because again, this is where I get lost in there's so many moving pieces that the state is paying and the state is putting mandates in, but they're not paying for their mandates. So I guess that's the rule number one that needs to get put in place. The rule number one needs to be that if the state says that this has to be done, then they have to fund it.
And that's where the fiscal capacity comes in. But there's another element to that as well, is that the mandates are at the classroom or grade band level at each school. The BEP funding funds not per classroom, they fund it a district as a whole. So if we had all 60,000 students, let's say, crammed into Neyland Stadium, and we did instruction in one giant facility, then, hey, we can make that work. Problem is that the state, obviously that's not practical. So we have 88 schools, but we're funded as if we have one. All districts are funded that way. So when the state looks, they just look at your total number of kindergartners. They look at your total number of first graders, and then they divide it by the classroom size. Well, clearly, that's not the optimal way that would provide sufficient funding to districts. So yeah, there are some unfunded mandates, and because again, the mandate is at the classroom level, but the funding is at the district level.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a disparity that needs to be corrected. And how? I mean, I don't know. Me struggling with the numbers we're talking about is going to say that it shouldn't be that hard for them to figure out how to do their math on the same, whichever they're going to do. They need to do apples to apples. If they're going to fund district-wide, then they fund district-wide, but they mandate district-wide, or they mandate and fund. They need to. Those things need to equal out by one way or the other, because either way works better than splitting the two. That makes sense to me.
Yes.
Okay. Jennifer, you got something? I'm reeling right now, trying to catch up.
I'm trying to find an actual textbook cost. The BEP component for textbooks is $77 per student. So if we're looking at current textbook costs, I'm not sure exactly what that number is, but I know it's a lot more than that. The only thing I've found so far says that the average cost of textbooks per student per year is $250, but I'm not finding the source on that. So I don't want to say that yet, but I think anybody who's bought a textbook knows that $77.50 is pretty low, especially when we're looking at,
I mean, I agree from historical reference when I was a student at UT buying textbooks and they were ridiculously expensive. But then at the same time, I could never figure out why they were that expensive. That was I know why they were that expensive, because you had to have that book, and they could do that because there was only one book and one publisher that puts out said book. So you have to have the book so I can sell it for what I want. That's a separate economics issue. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole.
Right. And when you're looking at textbooks for elementary students, for example, you have a lot of consumables, you have a lot of workbooks, you have a lot of those kinds of things, pieces for science experiments and all of those things.
Now, real quick on that,
77 is really, really low.
And on that though, just a little bit of an aside, is that changing now in the digital era, that we're, especially now that all Knox County kids have a computer, that some of the non-consumable versions of it, the more just straight, here's an article, here's a piece on George Washington or whatever, just that we're doing it digitally.
If we're using online textbooks, the cost comes out to about the same.
Okay. That seems weird.
I mean, if every teacher were going out and finding individual articles and getting permission for those individual articles, that would be a massive amount of legwork to do to be able to use those. So the textbook companies have done that. And if we order those online versions of the textbooks, it comes out about the same as the print version.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Man, another industry that I need to get in is textbook making. That sounds like a good deal. Maybe I can do a series of podcasts that I can sell to the school district.
And I think we talked last time, the state funds one nurse for every 3,000 students. That's crazy. We don't even have a school that has 3,000 students. So you don't have a nurse for each school.
Right. And that goes back to our mandate conversation is if you're going to mandate something, it needs to be on a logical comparison to what you're funding it for. If you're going to fund it for district wide, then the mandate has to be district wide, which still gets weird. But I mean, I don't know how, I guess that nurse one falls under that category, but, because then it becomes
their needs are beyond.
Right, and it becomes an infrastructure conversation. It's like, well, are we going to try to build a school for 3,000 kids just so we can have one nurse there, and shove everything in the same, try to maximize the number of kids because we have to fit it within this number set for this particular item that we need, or do we pay the extra out of pocket? I don't know. That's a weird one as well. I'm still at a loss of how to approach, like how actionable approaches to solutions, because what is again, like I feel like a little bit more informed version of we need to spend more money or we need to get more money from the state to do this is what we're having right now. But when I get a chance to talk to Massey or Manis or Zachary or one of those guys, like they're politicians, so they're obviously going to say, yeah, we want more money for the schools too. But what is an actionable, like, hey, this is something clear and direct that you can do that we need to get on board on, and you need to make this an issue because I'm asking you to as your constituent.
There's some education coalitions that have broken it down and looked at the BEP and looked specifically at places where it's severely underfunded, like school nurses. And so what they've done is pulled those things out and started talking about those one by one. So they're looking at first, no unfunded mandates. The huge place to be would be to go in and take all the mandates that aren't funded and fund them. Legislature's not going to do that in all 1 year because that's going to be a huge amount. But people could push for changing the ratio of students to school nurses. They could push for changing the amount that's put into technology. They could push for more school counselors and more social workers. So those are some individual areas that if they change that formula, it would make a difference for schools, because they are, if I'm not sure how many, Ron, do you know how many nurses we actually fund?
I would have to go, but we looked at that. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it does speak to, Jennifer, you raised that point, Seth, that the board passed legislative priorities and has been really good to meet with the legislative delegation and go over those and what it means for us and for other districts across the state. So the board's pretty engaged, with the legislators and telling them what the needs are for Knox County schools and how the formula could be improved. So, and the things that Jennifer mentioned are right. Some of those areas.
And this goes back to the big overarching premise that I have in general is that it's an engagement issue, because if I don't know about this, I don't know to bring this up to a candidate, because that's really where the rubber meets the road in that conversation. Is like this is an electable issue, or I'm not voting for you issue that needs to be addressed, and not just not just in rhetoric, but this is something we need to do something about. And when it's a campaign item, it becomes a bit more vocal, but it's got to be one of those where after the campaign, we continue to stay on them to do it as a community, not just, the school board and their lobby groups and stuff like that. It needs to be, and again, that's across the board on all the issues, not just school stuff. That needs to be the normal. Like, we need to engage better as citizens, and that's which I was the guiltiest of anybody until about 2-3 years ago, and that's the genesis of why I continue doing these shows and continue just pounding my head against the wall, because this is above my head in understanding, and I'm trying my best to get it at least palatable to other people like me, because I think that's where a lot of it's lost. Because when you get it in normal media and stuff like that, it's either they talked about it like you already know about it, or they do it oversimplified, where it doesn't have any meat to really sink into. I'm gonna have to take a nap after this one, guys. I'm gonna have to let my brain
I'll
reset.
say, Seth, that you're talking about how it is complicated. It is a lot of moving parts, but the thing is, you're probably way ahead on understanding than the average citizen. So if that tells you.
Well, yeah, exactly. But I guess that's one of my complaints in general when we're talking about governmental community and government interaction, is that whether it was intentional or whether it's just years and years of pileup, is it's so complicated. And to me, and again, this is just my simple mindset, is why is it so complicated? Does it need to be so complicated? I don't think it needs to be this complicated. It just is. And there's no effort to uncomplicate things to make it so that it's more engageable. And I think that's one of the issues as well. And on the list of things I don't know how to fix, how to make it less complicated is another one, because everything we're talking about, I keep thinking in my small business mind, it's like, well, why do we have a group half a state away making all the decisions with our money anyway? Just give us our money back and let us do it our way. And then it takes a whole different it takes a whole different approach, and then we don't have to have the only getting 4.5% of the 6% of the only getting 4.5% of the money for 6% of the population in the group. Well, we get our full 6%, and then we do what we want with it, where we should be more capable of being engaged, because my school board members are our neighbors. We know them, or we're capable of knowing them a lot better than we're capable of knowing I don't know, anybody in Nashville, other than the 3 or 4 that come from here. But again, I don't know that that's the correct solution either, but I think the complication is part of the problem to me. And how do we simplify just actually simplify the structure so that it's, again, because we're talking about, lining up mandates versus execution of the mandate, whether it's giving a mandate to a school, but only funding it to the system and stuff like that. I don't know how to break these down, and I don't know. Again, I'm rambling because I'm so lost in that part of it, that I don't know where to start on trying to unravel some of the yarn ball that has been created over 200 years of state craziness.
I gave you a link to the BEP Blue Book.
Uh-huh.
And if your listeners want to Google that, they can just Google Tennessee BEP Blue Book.
I will put all these links that you've been sending in the show notes, so that anybody who wants to jump on and do some more research for themselves, and maybe educate me in better terms would be fantastic.
I think a really easy place for people to look is just, it's basically a chart of the funding level in the formula. And if people just look through there and see that there's one social worker for 2,000 students, that's something that they can see that's easy to understand.
Right. How many?
So I think pulling out those pieces that are easy for people to understand is a good way to help them engage with legislators.
Okay. I like that. I'll use that. Because how many social workers did they send to Austin East over the last month for the one that they had prior to that?
Right.
And how many, if it had been, it could have been a preemptive situation with some of that. I mean, none of them were directly school involved, but they were around the school. But either way, that's a side tragedy that sucks, and It's just, again, to me, it's an example of it's a failure to use the investment properly of what schools are supposed to be, the investment in the kids, into the future, into the next generation, into the people that come out of the schools, and then our community leaders and those sorts of things. Oh God, I'm really gonna have to. I don't know. I'm out of stuff because my brain stopped working. I'm really broken right now. I appreciate you guys. I had I was so dead set on this was going to be like, I'm going to learn something. I'm going to have some real knowledge in this episode. And again, it goes back to it's just too damn complicated. It's too complicated, and it's not, and it's underengaged. And I think both of those things are a result of the other. The complication keeps people from engaging, and the engagement, the people that are willing to engage are functional inside the complication, so they don't feel the need to fix it. At least that's where I stand on it. So I had one thing, just a side note off of this interest, and it is school related, in that I don't know how to ask this question without sounding kind of rude, but do we have a stat on how many trans kids we have in Knox County schools?
I don't think so. I don't think that's something that we track.
Because,
are you talking about the sports bill?
Right. Because one of the things to me is as I was digging through it and starting to talk about it with some of the other guests and stuff like that, is that if the amount of attention on this bill versus the amount of impact doesn't remotely line up. Because I mean, I'm guessing, I don't know how many. I mean, we got 60,000 kids in Knox County schools. If we have 10 high schoolers that want to play sports and are trans, that would be a high guess in my estimate.
What I've been told is at the state level, there are literally, this impacts 0 people.
Really? That we know about, at least?
That we know of.
Right. Again, that's the point. My point being that, if my estimate is if my guess estimate is right, that we have 10, it's still, for the amount of attention versus the amount of impact, it's just it seems to me like initially I was like, I fell into the trap too, I guess is what I'm saying. I fell into the trap of, this is a big hot button issue. It's something to argue about. I do arguments for the show, and that's part of the thing. So that's a bonus for me. But realistically, of all the things that we have going on, even specifically in schools, for this one to take up any air versus a funding conversation just doesn't make any, like, it's I don't know. Is it's look at the shiny thing over here because we're doing stuff over here that you don't need to worry about. It's too complicated to talk about this stuff over here anyway. So
it's the appearance of doing something,
right,
instead of actually doing something.
Yeah. So anyway, that was just, like I said, it's not fully on topic of what we were here to talk about, but it was something that I'd been thinking about a lot, and I figure if I have somebody that has a little bit more insight, I might as well take the opportunity to ask it. I don't know. That's what I got. We got budget. When's the next school board meeting?
The first week of April.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is there a specific agenda already in the works, or are we still working agendas?
I think it will be posted Thursday.
Okay. Of course, I'm a couple days early. So did I understand correctly that the new COVID bills got we're going to get $100 million for Knox County? Did I hear that right? 114 million. Okay. So
yeah. And I think, sorry, Seth, go ahead.
No, I was thinking about that earlier today when I was, or a couple of weeks ago when I was re-listening to our original interview, and you were talking about debt service. So as a citizen, speaking to an elected official, Jennifer, I think we should probably use some of that 100 million something to pay off some of the debt service, so we don't have as much coming out of the general budget in debt services.
I don't think we can use it that way. It has to be specifically COVID related. It can't be any kind of recurring cost. So we can't hire more teachers, because then when the money ends in 2 years, those teachers end. So it can't be any kind of recurring cost. The state can't tell us how to use the money, even though in a roundabout way they are doing that, because if they lower the amount that we have for staff, they think we're going to be able to take it out of that money. So they're trying to tell us how to use it. So state can't tell us how to use it. We can't use it for any recurring expenses. And whatever we do use it for has to be specifically COVID related.
All right, well, then build a new school with it and say it's a COVID-free school because it's new.
Well, honestly, Seth, you've raised a good point, actually. So the state has been a bit flexible, right? Jennifer's absolutely correct. It has to be related to the pandemic. But the state, if we can lay it, if there are certain things like social distancing, I'm going to throw that out. And we have overcrowding in schools, and overcrowding leads to the need for additional facilities. I'm not saying that's what we're going to do, but I'm saying that those are the discussions we need to have, right, because we can be very strategic about these funds. Jennifer's right. We can't say, okay, we have a budget deficit, so we're just going to drop in all of these millions of dollars to cover that. That's not what the dollars are for. The feds are they're sticklers for the fact that it can't be used to supplant any recurring cost. It has to supplement. I will say this: we have used ESSER 2.0 that's what we're going to apply for it. We talked with the board this month about planned uses. We are using some of those dollars for virtual teaching positions. Right. So I think the argument could be made, yeah, those are recurring, but I think the mindset is, well, how much recurring and how far down the line, is it? So, right, we can't go out and just say, hey, we have BEP needs, and so we're going to use this money to hire more teachers, right? But it can indirectly and will indirectly help our operating budget because whether it's purchasing the one-to-one initiative, we're putting a new Chromebook in the hands of every student. That's kind of a multi-year rollout. We can use these dollars for that. If we didn't have access to these dollars, then we would be having to try to find certain revenue sources to actually do that. And the only place would be the general purpose budget. And so while you can't use it to fund a budget gap per se, you can strategically use these dollars to continue to keep them out of the general purpose budget so that they're not competing with other initiatives.
Right.
And I think that one thing we're grappling with is even probably at the state level, there may be this notion that, hey, school districts are getting all these federal dollars, so we being the state, we don't have to fund at a level that we otherwise would have to. Well, that's a kind of that thinking is.
I mean, it defeats the point. Right. Right. The point is that we had a specific event that happened, and this is to help get us through this specific event, not to change the structure of how you're doing stuff, even if it's just for a short-term.
That's right.
Savings, whatever.
That's right, and it's multi-year. We have till 2023 to fund, to obligate the funds, and it's kind of like, and I've had a conversation with another board member who was talking to me about having concerns at what at the state level, what's the state's mindset on this, and it would be like, okay. A tornado blows my roof off right at my home. So that's insured. I get dollars. I get $15,000 of my insurance money to put the roof back on. And then my employer comes back to me and says, well, I'm going to reduce your salary $15,000 because so it's the mindset we have to be, that we hope, that folks at the state level understand that these funds, and one would hope they would, that these funds are not used to supplant any dollars that otherwise would come to us through local or state sources. They're on top of, and they're generated with the idea to help us through the pandemic and the effects that has caused through the next couple of years.
Right. I think, yeah, because I think that's the right. That's the mindset should, right. We were very lucky inside the system that we have and the way we collect and spend money as a government to not have a significant shortfall due to a drop in the economy. So
right.
Let's take advantage of that bonus that we're getting from the federal government to take care of some things that we maybe been pushing off down the road a little bit with that federal funding, instead of, just not spending a few dollars this year. Let's do what we normally do and then just add this bonus on because we are lucky enough to be in that position. I agree with that.
Exactly.
All right. You got my vote on that one. Not that I get to vote on it, but I don't know. Jennifer, is anything you want to get in before we call it a show? You're muted, Jennifer.
Sorry, I was trying not to
I
have all
know.
the keyboard sound in there.
I appreciate it.
I'm adding in a link to future school board agendas and also a link to videos of past meetings.
Okay.
So if folks want to go back and see, get an idea of how things go.
And I assume it's there. I haven't looked, but on the Knox County School website, they've got a listing of school board members and their emails or whatever through the school board, so you can find out who your
link in there too.
Right, who your board member is and how to get in touch with them would be a handy one. I know mine's Virginia Bab, and but other than that, I'm still working through. There's too many people. There's way too many people. There's too many organizations. There's too many things. I got a list from the county commission of all the boards that the commission oversees or is within the county through the mayor's office, either by state mandate or by the county charter, and it's like 4 pages long. There's a lot of people. So gives me a lot of content. I guess I can keep going and doing more and more shows. Well, I am spent. I am going to pack this up and make it sound a little better than it does to us right now, and then I will post it out there, and I will try to tag you guys in the link and stuff like that. I'll put a bunch of these different links that Jennifer's provided in the show notes, as well as on the Facebook page for anybody who wants to follow up on any of these particular items. We are, I don't know, we're coming into, we're coming out of the pandemic, we're coming to the end of the school year. We're going to have a whole summer of next year's budget talks and the new fiscal year getting started. And so there's going to be a lot of activity going on between that and the COVID monies that's coming into play. So I will be watching intently, and I will be following up with both of you and other school board members in the near future. You guys don't have the school board doesn't have any elections until 22, right?
Right.
Okay, so I can put the election part of that. I just got city races to deal with for right now. So, any last words?
I don't think so.
Always a pleasure, Seth. Thanks.
Ron, I appreciate you. Jennifer, I appreciate you. And it's time for the outro. Nope, not that one. Wrong button. Hold on. I hit the wrong button. I've been on vacation. Okay, I'm sorry. I've got to get back into the swing of things. There it is. That's the outro music button. All right, everybody. That's Almost in Agreement. Thank you to Ron and Jennifer for coming on and helping me, I don't know, trying to help me understand how complicated and crazy this stuff is. And I think there's the two main outcomes here is that it's all about engagement. It's all about engagement. It's all about engagement. Get to know the people and get involved and make it so that you actually have a real educated, knowledgeable base to start from when you're having conversations about things so that we can go and move forward and try to, I'm going to stick with the analogy, try to unravel that yarn ball to make it a little simpler and to get to things. And then the other thing is a community. We need to figure out what we want our schools to be. And we need to have a unified outlook of what we want out of our schools, what we want out of our teachers, what we want our kids to grow and become, whether they're your kids personally or whether your neighbor's kids or the kids across the street or whatever. These kids grow up to be part of the community that we live in. And if we want them, what do we want them to be when they start engaging to us as adults? So we're Almost in Agreement, almostinagreement@gmail.com, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. The website is live, almostinagreement.com. All the episodes are on there. Check us out. Have a great day.